The Rough Country 2-inch leveling or strut extension kit will be one of the most affordable ways to get your truck 2 inches higher in the front, not only giving you a more leveled appearance, but also making room for some bigger wheels and tires. In fact, with this kit installed, Rough Country claims you can squeeze a set of 33 by 12.5s underneath your truck without issue. On top of that, this extremely popular and highly rated kit here on the site will match the Zone Off-Road 2-inch leveling kit for most affordable in the category at right around that $100 price point. Installation, you're looking at a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. Installation time, anywhere from a few hours to a half a day in the shop or garage. So the big question we always get around here is why level your truck as opposed to going with those full-blown suspension lift kits? Well, it's pretty simple, guys. It's gonna be to get the truck level, obviously improving the appearance and your ground clearance, and just to squeeze a slightly bigger set of wheels and tires underneath there as well. Not only that, 100% of the time, a leveling kit like this is going to be far more affordable than those full-blown suspension lift kits with the drop knuckles and all that good stuff that oftentimes start around $1,000 but can go anywhere up to $3,000 to $4,000 depending on how crazy you want to get. On top of that, by keeping things simple with a strut extension or leveling kit like this, the install is going to be far easier like we already talked about. There's no cutting or anything involved, and the ride quality really won't be all that different from the stock ride quality because realistically you're not changing the geometry all that much. Now sure, those CV angles are going to be a little bit more extreme than they were before in factory form, but as long as you're not doing any hardcore rock crawling or off-roading, this really shouldn't be too much of a concern. Instead, this kit is going to be a great choice for a majority of F-150 owners out there who realistically are going to spend most of their time on the pavement with maybe a few off-road days mixed in for good measure. But let's talk about how this thing works, and honestly guys, it's extremely simple. A strut extension kit is just that. It's a disc that's gonna mount to the top of the strut assembly, usually ranging from 1 to 3 inches thick, raising the front end of the truck in the process while leaving the rear untouched, giving you that more leveled appearance. Now, the reality is these trucks from the factory come with the slightest bit of rake, and that means the front end is typically a little bit lower than the rear, and this is done for a number of different reasons, but mainly aerodynamics and also towing. But the problem is not everybody is a big fan of this appearance. Now the Rough Country kit will eliminate that nose down look thanks to the 2-inch 6061 billet aluminum spacers that do also include the hardware, of course, and they are going to mount to the top of those strut assemblies like we already talked about. Now there are other manufacturers out there that will offer a bigger lift for the front end up to 3 inches plus using an extension like this. And there's also companies that are going to offer smaller lifts as well, but the 2 to 2.5 inch range will be the sweet spot for this truck. It's what you're going to see a majority of the time in the aftermarket or in the category. Now this is also a great time to point out that Rough Country does offer a slightly snazzier version of this kit that does also include rear shocks, longer U-bolts, and rear blocks as well that will lift the rear of the truck slightly higher in the process. But ultimately guys, this is your call to make. If you do want to check that thing out, it is also here at AT. You can find that for about $100 more than the kit we have on the table. Now before we show you some of the installation, I do want to quickly talk tires because this is kind of a 50-50 type thing. Some owners out there are perfectly fine with leveling the truck and leaving the stock wheels and tires on simply because they like that leveled appearance. Other owners want to do it to fit a larger tire. And I will say Rough Country does claim you can fit a 33 on with this kit. We did try it. I personally think it looks a little bit better, a little bit more aggressive, but ultimately again, that is your call to make. But let's switch gears and talk about that installation here briefly, gang. And I did stick with 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter because yes, there is some elbow grease involved, but at the same time, it's not nearly as bad as those full-blown suspension lift kits that we talked about earlier. So installation time, anywhere from a few hours to a half a day in the shop or garage, depending on your expertise and your setup. As far as your tool list, well, you're looking at a number of different sockets and extensions in addition to a few open-ended wrenches. Definitely gonna need a hammer, and I suggest having a vise ready as well. And then finally, a way to get the front end of the truck up in the air, whether it be lift, jack, or jack stands, that's totally your call. And speaking of getting the front end of the truck up in the air, that will obviously be your first step in addition to removing the front wheels and tires. And also at this point, go ahead and unplug the electric power steering computer. Now you can go ahead and remove the tie rod nut in addition to removing the 2 brake caliper bolts and the front brake rotors as well, making room for some work that happens behind all of that stuff. Loosen those 2 lower control arm bolts, but don't totally remove them. You can now remove that upper control arm nut. At this point, you can remove the strut assembly from the truck using the 18mm socket and the necessary bolts on the lower portion and the upper portion of the assembly. Now, once those strut assemblies are removed from the front end of your truck, go ahead and install the new extensions from Rough Country using the included hardware. At this point, you can reinstall the front strut assembly, reassemble the front suspension and braking components, reinstall the front wheels, and your installation is complete. Now, obviously, this is just a general overview of most of the big steps with the install, just to give you a better idea of what you're working with. But at the end of the day, if you don't feel confident with tackling this one, you might want to give your local shop a buzz. Wrapping things up here, gang, if you're looking for an extremely affordable way to get the front end of that new F-150 2 inches higher, making for a more leveled look, but also squeezing in a set of 33s, you'll want to check out the 2-inch strut extension kit from Rough Country here at AmericanTrucks.com.